Hey y'all, and welcome back to the garden. So we had, as a little weather update, because I feel like I'm a weatherman sometimes, we had a storm come through the area and it's super windy today, again, as our usual fall weather is. So hopefully you can hear me, like super, super windy. The trees are blowing sideways here. But we had a storm come through the area earlier this week, and I think most of it missed us. We did get some rain, but not enough that with this wind it did really anything. So the garden's still pretty dry, and there was little that got done this week because the temperatures are staying a little consistently lower, especially in the afternoon after work when I come out and do a lot of my garden work. So I started clean out this week. I cleaned out all of my annual containers and threw those away. And I also did the vegetable garden. So we're gonna go over there, and I have some ideas for the vegetable garden next year. So I'm trying to keep things watered just because things are drying out so bad. So you can see how much this boxwood looks dried out since I transplanted it from the container. I did treat this again for spider mites. This is one that was in a container that had some spider mite damage. And we'll just see how that recovers next spring. Hopefully it'll be a little better. But I came through and pulled out all of my vegetables, all the peppers and everything out of these earth boxes. Everything out of this bed and this wood space here. And so what I'm going to do for this space next year, or what I'm thinking about doing, I don't know that I will get around to it. There's at least one change, if I don't make a major change, that I'm going to do. So these are earth boxes, which I've made videos on my channel before, and I've really liked them. They've been in this like assembly area like this, or assembled like this, for about 4 years. So they're just on a wood frame, and they automatically refill. I removed the automatic refilling device because of the freezes we've been having. But I am not loving the wood now that it's been here for a few years. It was a great thing to get me started as an early gardener. As it's gotten older, it needs to be repainted, and that's not really something that I want to have to endure very often. So I'm considering replacing all of these with metal garden beds. And so along with that, what I would do is remove this section completely. This wouldn't be here. And then I would have a metal garden bed that essentially makes an L. So it goes down to the corner and goes this way. I'm considering buying the taller beds just so, you know, future proofing, so I don't have to bend over and get in them as much, because otherwise they'll be the same height as this one. So this one's 17. The next size up they make is 32, which I think would be good against the house here. It would cover almost all of the foundation. And then in this area, these wood beds would come out if I do the major renovation. So I told you I'm going to be keeping the dahlias in this bed over winter. I'm still waiting for these to freeze back pretty good. You can see all the blooms look pretty rough right now, but I need them to freeze good before I cut them back. And then this is mostly for storing them over winter. If I do what I want to do next year, this bed will come out and I'll move them to the bed that I'm going to put in this space. So the bed that I want to put in this space is essentially a keyhole bed like this one that I made from wood, but it's going to be turned this way so the keyhole is from this way. So it'll be a U-shaped like this. One of the reasons I want to do that, so I may be losing a little bit of planting space, but this area becomes really crowded in the summer, and I can't get as much use out of these beds because it becomes so crowded. So you can see I have a very narrow walkway here. The dahlias have spilled over that. Usually when I have tomatoes in this bed, tomatoes spill over into the bed, and so it's difficult to reach anything from that size. So I think if I reorient this entire bed this way, this bed will also probably get moved or go to the back, and then I will have a bigger open space here. And so I don't want to be wasteful of space, but I also want to kind of be able to get my garden cart in to bring amendments. Right now, that's not something I can do easily. The boxwood hedge on the other side is still relatively small, so I can reach over it. But as it continues to grow up, accessing this bed in particular is going to be difficult. So in the end, this bed will come out, well, all of this will come out, but this bed won't be here, and it'll be a U. And then we'll just have an L here, and this will be open. So if I wanted to do any containers or anything, the U bed is still going to come to where this one is. And so the only really open space I would have would be right here. and that allows me enough room to get a cart in and accessible everywhere. Along with that, I'm probably going to be removing this trellis or arbor. So this arbor's also served its purpose for about 4 years, but it also needs to be repainted. I pulled the honeysuckle that I had planted, or I chopped it down to the ground this year, and I'm probably going to dig that out when it starts coming up next year and get it out of the way because it looked really bad this fall. But it's become super wobbly. It is made of cedar and it probably could use some reinforcing, but I think I'm going to take this back to the backyard or see if I can give it away to someone. And instead, when this area comes out, I will probably continue the boxwoods here a little bit, and then I might add boxwood cones instead here. So there'll be an entrance with the boxwood cones, kind of like the entrance down there, the boxwood cones, and it'll be kind of mirror that space. And so we can continue the bed this way. One thing I don't know that I'll get rid of next year yet will be this part of the bed. So this area really needs to be replanted, but eventually this dogwood that I planted here is going to grow up and shade this space, so there's not going to be a ton of planting available here. It might be a place that would still be good to plant lettuces and stuff. But one of the issues with this one and why I may not tackle it next year, because I'll be doing all of this myself, is when I had the patio installed, I asked them to install the patio as if this wood thing would never be here. Honestly, the patio installation was kind of a disaster. It was a really difficult process for me. It took 2 months from start to finish, and the people told us it was going to take 2 weeks. So every time I look at this patio, I'm reminded of how difficult that was. But they didn't build the patio necessarily around this correctly like I asked them to. And so when I remove this wood box, I don't know what I'm going to run into. So you can see the brick kind of go here to the wood. I did save some leftover bricks to go to the end if I ever needed them, but I honestly don't know what's behind here. So when I go removing this, there's no telling what's behind there. So it may be something I take the wood off the front just to see what might be in there. I have no idea, and it kind of scares me. And to the extent I remove this, I think any issues over there could probably be masked by a large shrub or boxwood. And evergreen probably is something I would plant there just to cover that space year round. So now you kind of know why I hate big projects, because it seems like nothing goes completely to plan. And so that's one of the reasons these earth boxes haven't been ripped out yet, is because of that specific issue. But I think I could get the rest of the wood off fairly easily and maybe just leave that one as a fall project potentially. I don't know. So follow along and we'll see what happens next year. Now this is a project that I have in mind. I am at the point where I'm tired of tackling big projects, but it's something that has to be done. So I'm not sure if this will happen in the spring or not. The issue with it not happening in the spring is this is my vegetable garden. So if I don't tackle it in the early spring, I can't plant vegetables out, or I would have to do it in the fall. And I don't really want to be dealing with it in the fall because our weather's so sporadic. And like this year, if I waited till October to do this, I would get halfway through it and then it would be too cold for me to finish it probably. So there's lots of things to consider. I'm still trying to work out exactly what beds I want to put in that spot. I do want to go for metal beds that will last a long time. I'm not replacing them with wood anymore, just because I want this to be something permanent, a little bit more elevated, that once I install, I don't have to move it again for as long as I own this house. Along with the vegetable garden, so I'm going to start this weekend probably planting some bulbs before I start my fall cleanup. And why I want to do that ahead of time is because some of these plants get kind of big, and I'm afraid that if I cut them down, then I'll lose that aspect of spacing when I'm putting the bulbs in the ground. So I need their foliage and everything there for my brain to be like, oh, Matthew, you need to put these bulbs in this area, because if you don't, they'll be covered later in the spring. Now that may not be an issue because all of these bulbs are going to be daffodils. Their foliage will stick around a little bit, so if they get a little bit of sun, but if we head into the summer as their foliage dies down and then they're covered up, that's not as big of an issue. And that's kind of a design aspect you want to consider with bulbs, is planting them so their foliage is just kind of eventually disguised by other things around there. But I need to come through and pull out the rest of the annuals that are in the flower beds, including the zinnias. You can see here the freeze and the cold weather has finally eaten them up. One thing I'm sad to see gone was this plant right here. I'm going to come through and collect a lot of the seed pods from it to save and give away to friends. This is the Ruby Moon Hyacinth Bean Vine, and you can tell it's just ruined from the freeze and the frosts we've had. More zinnias here that need to come out. I'm a bit concerned about this boxwood. So it's been in the ground a year. It put on a little bit of growth this year, but it has wintered up and turned bronze really quickly. It was not the best of green color like this one right here next to it all year, and so I think it's struggling. This area of the garden, along with all these weeds I need to remove, tends to hold water, and so it's kind of a lower spot right here. So I'm afraid I might lose this boxwood and have to replace it next year. I'm not sure, and we'll just have to keep an eye on that. It's not dead. You can see under here there's still lots of green. It's just the outer, a lot of bronzing going on with the boxwoods this year that have not bronzed up this early in the past. I'll take you over there and show you the sprinter hedge in a minute. So I showed you the Proven Winners new introductions for next year a while back in a few videos ago. This is Reminiscent Coral, and this is where I ended up sticking it right next to the back of the flower bed here, and you can see how beautiful this coral rose is. And so I think it'll be protected from sprinkler overspray in this location. I can put it on drip. There's a drip line that runs right around here, even though nothing in this bed is on drip. And it stays, you know, it gets a little tall, 3 to 4 foot tall, and then only about 2 foot wide. And so I think it'll fill the space really nicely right here and be a nice backdrop in front of these evergreens in the fence. You can see this line of sprinters that I have here. There's more green, but all of these bronzed up really bad already this fall, and so I'm interested to see how they perform over winter. But the fact that these well, you can see they're bronzed mostly the way the wind's been blowing. So this way they don't look so bad, but when you come this way, they're way more bronzed. Then we have these boxwoods on the south side, which hardly have any bronzing except on the lower branches, which might actually be dead branches because the dogs step on them often. I'm going to come through and trim the tops of these just very gently this fall, primarily to get them to bush out a little bit. Sprinters tend to have a more upright growth initially, and they don't seem to branch out as much. You can see in these right here, these are sprinters, and then these are winter green, I believe, and they're just much more bulky, even though these were planted after and have caught up in size. So sprinters do tend to grow faster, but the winter greens tend to go out a little further. And so these need to come through and trimmed as well here, just so we can start getting some more of that bushy growth. And then the south side bed that I've been working on, I'm completely finished with other than putting the drip irrigation in, which I'm probably going to come through and wait till spring to do that. And then I'll put mulch directly on top of it. A lot of people mulch in winter. I just don't have the willpower to do it this winter. Because it'll also need to be done in the spring. And so these plants are protected enough here that I think they'll be perfectly fine. But everything's looking pretty good, I think. We do have some stuff going into their fall coloration, like this groundhug aronia here. I did show you this St. John's wort or hypericum called brigadoon. It is really beautiful this fall. Look at this fall color here. So I'm going to go through and look at my bulbs and my bulb heights to get a refresher on that, and then I'm going to start planting those this weekend, probably before it gets any cooler. That way I can start coming in and pulling weeds and cleaning up the garden beds, cutting down the rest of the perennials. There's lots of things that still need to be cut down. I'm considering partially cutting my lavender, which I typically don't do until the spring, but I might do a half cut on it just to protect the crown a little bit, because the issue I have with it is holding leaves over the winter, and so before all the leaves fall, that's something I'm considering as well. So just wanted to do a quick video, check in, because there's not been a whole lot that's gone on this week. Just a lot of dreaming and brainstorming for next year and what I need to do next year. And so thank you guys for following along, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care. Bye.